Hello, good morning, bon dia a tothom, benvinguts a tots els que esteu connectats. Good morning, Mark. We have the honor today to have one of the most important persons in the film industry and yes, for us it is. There are a lot of students. You can't imagine how many students you were the inspiration for them. For example, Mario, the one who will have problems with the audio, you are an inspiration for him. I know because I'm directing the final dissertation degree, and you can't imagine and how many professors use your films to show to the students, and it's a big honor to have you. And I want to thank you also, Elisabet, to give us the opportunity to have somebody like Mark Cousins with us. And well, thank you very much. And if you're ready, we can start. And thanks again.
Thank you, Judith. And thank you, Mark, for joining us today. It's truly
You're welcome, Elisabet. Sure, thank you, Judith.
Yeah, it's a more formal conversation, but I'm so excited to have the chance to discuss film in depth with you. So first of all, I'll start with launching a question around women make film, which most of us students have seen and are watching at the moment. And I was wondering, because you have so many projects always, you're constantly so busy, and I thought, what triggered your decision to decide that it was the time to be doing this? You mentioned in the series an idea that I love when you talk about journey. And, you know, sometimes we're pushed, sometimes we're pulled onto the road. And if you could give us some insights on how this journey started for you.
Yes, that's right, Elisabet. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is push and pull. You know, women make film it's just about it's about a love of cinema and a hatred of discrimination. You know, and so we started making it about 6 or 7 years ago now. And it came about from a period actually long before that. About 25 years ago, I did a history of documentary cinema. And then when I looked back in the history, there were hardly any women in it. This was in the mid-90s. And I thought, I will not make that mistake again. And so from the mid-90s onwards, anytime I went to a country, I would say, who are your great female filmmakers? I asked this in Albania, in Bulgaria, in Russia, in Senegal, in Mauritania, anywhere I went. And so over the years, the sort of list of great female filmmakers in my head got longer and longer and longer. And I started carrying them with me, you know, on bits of thing. That's Kira Muratova from Ukraine. That's Safi Faye from Senegal. That's Rakshan Bani Etemi from Iran. I carried these people in my suitcase as I traveled. And I just got more and more frustrated when we talked about women directors, people said the same things all the time. You know, I heard people say, Catherine Bigelow makes films like a man. How dare people say that? Catherine Bigelow makes films like Catherine Bigelow. And there was not enough emphasis on the creativity of these great directors, you know, the creativity, treating them as filmmakers. So I thought, why don't I have a go? And we had no budget. This was long before Harvey Weinstein or the Me Too movement, but we just went for it and it got bigger and bigger and bigger.
I was going to ask precisely about the context, because this one thing is the personal need, but then when it comes to film, you need the interest of other people, not only for producing, but also the audience you're addressing. So did the road get easier at some point? Because it took some time to develop, of course, being so complex.
Yeah, the audience I made it for film lovers. I presume everybody on this Zoom call is a film lover, and that's who it's for. I've always had a feeling that those of us who love cinema were a kind of posse or a tribe or an extended family, and we have this in common, whatever our other differences. So it was that for people who love cinema. It didn't, we knew there would be no money. We had no backup from a TV station or an institute to fund us. So you're working, just with your own resources, but that's fine. I'm not scared of that. And as a filmmaker, I have a very cheap lifestyle. I don't take taxi cabs. I don't go to fancy restaurants. So I do not need to earn a lot of money. The biggest challenge in terms of any filmmaking, I think, is the creative challenge. How to avoid the conventions, how to avoid the conventional wisdom, and how not to do what's always done. So, for example, in Women Make Film, for those of you who have seen it, we do not tell a chronological story. We do not start at the beginning and work our way through, nor do we do country by country or continent by continent. Instead, it's a series of 40 chapters. And I thought, if I can get a structure right, 40 chapters with different interesting themes, then maybe it'll be good. And this is the piece of paper that I scribbled. I've got very bad handwriting, so I scribbled the chapters on that piece of paper. And that was my structure. And that's the hardest bit, Elisabet, the creative bit. How do I avoid banality? How do I come up with it's like you're building a building. What is the blueprint of the building?
I note that the idea of journey, or my impression is that it's very present in your work, even in your writing, and I love that. Maybe your biography will be called On the Road. I don't know, but I see it in not only in Women Make Film, but in many other documentaries, and as I said, the writing. Does it have to do with the need of discovery? And I'm thinking discovery towards the audience or your readers, but also your own.
Yeah.
It feels like you're very hungry to find out more and explore roads that are not you haven't yet traveled.
Yes, I think that's right. I think I do my best thinking and filming when I'm on the road. I love walking across cities, and so I've walked across Los Angeles, and I've walked across Paris and Istanbul and Mexico City and Barcelona and Madrid and many, many cities. A lot of people, writers and filmmakers, are at their best when they're mobile. One of my heroes, Virginia Woolf, who I've got tattooed on my arm here, she talks about the relationship between creativity and mobility. And a thinker like Walter Benjamin, who died quite close to where you guys are now in Catalonia, he talks about the relationship between creativity and mobility as well. So for me, that's very important. Road movies are probably my favorite type of film, because when you're on the road, you can sort of loosen up about yourself. You can be anybody on the road. You get lost. You can unravel as a human being on the road. And when you unravel, when your mind loosens, that's when you're at your most creative, I think. And that's why Women Make Film has got all those driving shots. And those of you who have not got to the end of Women Make Film, but you've seen some of it, the driving shots are actually leading somewhere, but I won't tell you where.
Yeah, it also feels very personal as well. I love the way you anchor your research to life and the idea of film to life. And that also I see throughout your work. And you pointed out that, it's so personal that you have some of
Yes.
the names of your favorite filmmakers that you don't. So could you talk a bit about that, the idea of life and film and the way it can be very serious on the academic and the research front, but also reminding that film is life and is about life as well.
Yes, that's very important for me, Elisabet. Cinema for me has always been about passion. I was brought up very Catholic, and I was brought up in Northern Ireland. You know, we had the war, the Troubles, as we called it. We had a war there, and I was quite a nervous child. You know, sort of quite, you know, scared of what was going on, but. And I was bullied at school as well, you know, which means you're quite defensive. But when I went into a cinema, I let my defenses down completely. I could absolutely breathe deeply in a cinema when the lights went down. I could also forget my troubles, I think many of us can lose our identity in a movie theater. And on the big screen, you know, the big screen is a kind of anarchic, androgynous space where you can really lose yourself. So that, when I realized in my childhood that cinema would give me those pleasures of comfort, escape, it felt as if I had found a friend or somebody to take my hand through life and say, come and I will show you, you know, New York in the 1930s. Come and I'll show you the moon in Star Wars. Come and I'll show you what a giant shark looks like in Jaws. Come and I'll show you what the devil looks like in Exorcist. So these things, this kind of unique, affordable, sublime was very valuable. And it's remained with me throughout my life. So yes, it is very personal. Yes, I am a filmmaker, but I'm a film lover even more than that.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier, and you showed us the piece of paper where you wrote about the structure of Women Make Film, and that idea is present as well there. I think in the titles of the chapters,
yes.
They can go from very specific formal.
Yes.
Like you know, character introduction.
Yes, yeah, character introduction there, yeah, and then it goes into dancing, and well, actually, dance sequence moved down here, but dreaming and bodies and interiority and various things. Yeah,
life, death, and
yeah. I think that's the thing about cinema. Cinema is form and content. It's shots and cuts, but also dreams and desires and fears, and it's very good at dreams and desires and fears. So I like making films which combine formal or technical things with some things that are profoundly deep in us as human beings, if we admit it.
Yeah, and that's very relevant from a pedagogical point of view. I think, you know, that there's to go to the motivation or the goal of certain decisions, well, all the decisions that come with filmmaking.
I think so, and I think that the ideal, like when I scribbled this structure for the film, which lasted for, you know, we looked at this for 5 years, I was using my brain, my intellect, but at a second stage, you need to switch your intellect off and let your subconscious do the work in a way. And therefore you need to, you know, we're, as human beings, we can do many things. We can really analyze, but then we can absolutely engage with a more emotional realm, as it were. And that combination can often be a good one for a film.
Could you discuss a bit more in depth what your method is when it comes to, because there's such an impressive and vast research. We can sense that when we see your work, but I think it would be really useful for all of us to learn how you approach research when it comes to, you know, you have a very wide knowledge of film, but when it comes to researching a particular subject, how do you go about talking to people and also deciding what films will be used to illustrate the points?
The crucial thing for me is the planning stage, that first stage, and you get a big piece of paper. I'll show you typically one of them. This is this is a big piece of paper that I got that I wrote. See the scribble for a film that I made called Atomic. And those first, look, it's torn here, but those first ideas, those structural ideas, scribble them down as fast as possible. So this is the beginning of the film. Then that line there refers to a structural change. Then I knew the middle of the film needed to be chaotic, hence that scribble. And then as we get later and later in the picture, it becomes more ordered. So I start with that, the structure. And once you've got that right, then it's a huge relief. And that can take minutes. And a film I made about Orson Welles, it took minutes for the full structure. That I just showed you probably took about 20 minutes, but sometimes it can take a month or so. So then the next stage, if it's one of my films about cinema, like the story of film or women make film, then I just take loads of notes. And if you look, can you see 2 orange folders just there? See that? Well, they are my notes on women make film. So this one is called Themes. As you can see, the film then was called Vision and Film and Women, so we changed the title. So these are the themes of the film. So there, for example, it says setting tone. So that's one of the chapters. And then these are my notes on the scene. Oops, I'm dropping bits. My notes on the bits of films that I would use. So it's lots of scribbles and lots of paper work. Then once I've done all that, and here's another piece of paper I can show you. This is Women Make Film. And can I show you the length of this?
That's very impressive.
This is a 20. It's 20 meters long. So once I've done
the road itself, huh?
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah, and it hangs on my walls here. You can see if I turn my camera around. There's a sheet of paper there. That's one of my new films. So once I've done that, then you can breathe deeply, because that's the hard bit. Then after that, I will watch a film on my computer and type as I write in the present tense. The script never comes first. The script, I will always write to the shot that I'm looking at. And that's why in my work, I often say this and here, and I write in the present, not in the past. I would never say Jane Campion did something. I would say Jane Campion does something. Because I want you to feel when you're watching that we're watching at the same time. We're sitting together in the dark looking at something, and hence the present tense.
Going back to the personal aspect of your work with your documentaries about film, could you pick, I know it's a very difficult question, but could you pick a moment that was a surprise or that moved you in a particular way when you discovered a piece of film, when you talk to somebody that enlightened you in a surprising way?
I can hear somebody's.
Yeah.
Can you?
Could you please?
Yeah, well, why don't I choose Anna Mariscal, for example? When making Women Make Film, I knew Anna Mariscal was an actor, but I had not seen her films as a director. And when we premiered Women Make Film, I can still hear an audio somewhere, can you?
Yeah,
please, somebody, can you turn up the sound, all the assistants, please? Yes, I think now it works.
No, I can still hear it.
Please, the sound. Okay.
It's gone now, I think. And apologies. So, for example, when we showed Women Make Film in the Madrid Cinematheque, I asked the audience who has seen the films directed by Anna Mariscal, and I think one hand went up. So that's an example of a Spanish filmmaker who directed very, very good films. I had not seen her work, and so that was a discovery. Kinyo Tanaka, here in my arm, who was famous as an actor again in the great Japanese films of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I'd only seen one of her films as a director. She is a really great director. So that was a discovery as well.
One of the lecturers at the faculty has asked me to put this question to you, to do with the concept of female gaze. What's your informed point of view about the topic?
So, that's female gaze and male gaze were ideas that came around in the 1970s. And they were very useful then, because back then we had adverts for cars with women in bikinis draped over them. It was really appalling, particularly about advertising. I think it was a blunt instrument. And female gaze and male gaze assumes that the woman or the man is heterosexual, for example. What do we do about, how does the female gaze relate to the work of Pedro Almodovar, for example? So I'm more interested in the idea of the androgynous gaze. I think that some of the best films about women have been made by men, and some of the best films about men have been made by women. Think of Claire Denis' film, or there's a recent film on Netflix called One Night in Miami, which is about Martin Luther King, etc., directed by women. It's nearly all men in the cast. So I think this is something that Tilda Swinton and I have talked a lot about. I think that transgressive nature of cinema is so valuable that we need to hold on to that. So I do not use the phrase the female gaze or the male gaze for those reasons. Useful in its time, but dangerously heterosexist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then also it's a kind of a trap, because if you, like I've seen it with the interviews, I interview a lot of filmmakers, and whenever it's a woman filmmaker, usually they say, what a relief not to be asked, how does it feel to be a woman filmmaker? Because instead of talking about their work, they end up talking about the female gaze.
To ask women directors to talk only about the female gaze or the role in the industry, I think is to re-victimize them in some way. Women filmmakers should talk about whatever they want, particularly their creativity. And I think, I've had lots of people say to me, but if you look at a sex scene, you can tell whether it's directed by a woman or a man. And I say, well, have you seen the sex scenes of Catherine Breillat, for example? People say women don't direct sex scenes where you see body parts and it's more about tenderness and emotion. There are loads of examples where that is not the case, and we have to celebrate the right of those women to make sex scenes like they want to. So again, I think the generalizations, Elisabet, about what men are and women are and how they look at the world, these generalizations are dangerous and imprisoning, I think, in some ways.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you were talking about some of the topics in Women Make Film with Tilda Swinton. You have exceptional work directed by women on the screen, but you also have very exceptional women doing the voiceover.
Yes.
So I was curious to find out what was their reaction when you told them, if they would like to join the project, being women in the industry, and also what insights, if any, if you discussed, because of course they are voicing your thoughts, but I was wondering if their thoughts are there too.
So yeah, I was so lucky to work with Tilda Swinton and Jane Fonda and Kerry Fox and Angela Aldo and Deborah Winger and etc. The brilliant Sharmila Tagore in India, who's one of the most famous women in cinema. Fantastic. I wanted to work with women who were highly creative and who have also spoken on this question of gender and sexuality, and each of them has rejected the gender stereotypes of a certain type of girly girl and masculine boy. So this was fantastic to work with them. Because we were working on very little money, it's very, very hard to get Jane Fonda to do the voice in your film, very hard. So I had to be very creative and convincing, and emails to her circle of, you get closer and closer. But she, when she read the script, she said, I'd be honored to do this. And that was the same with most of the filmmakers. Kerry Fox cried, I remember Adjo Ando cried, Tandy Newton cried when they were reading it, because of the realization that that they were standing on the shoulders of giants, to use that phrase. There are so many great female filmmakers, Any of the voiceover artists who wanted to make changes to the script, I was delighted if they wanted to, but almost no changes were made, because part of it was because most of this work had not been seen. And so they hadn't seen of, say, Binka Jelyaskova or someone, so they couldn't then change the script to...
¿Dónde vas?
I don't know what's going on here. It's very mysterious.
Some people are forgetting.
Please, the microphone. Please, everybody, turn off the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, moving on, since some of the students that made the goal are studying film genre and narrative and film genre, I was wondering if you could give us some insight about the idea of gender and genre, because I think there's a lot of virgin territory to explore from an academic point of view, realizing that the classics precisely, and the idea of certain genre codes to do with gender.
Yes. I think, it's very interesting, these two words. What are the words in Catalan? Are there two words in Catalan?
The same, actually. Okay. It's the same word,
so such similar words, gender and genre. And in cinema, in the words are so similar as we say them, but in cinema, I think they are very far apart. I've heard many people say that the war movie is a male genre, or the film noir or gangster picture is a male genre. But the best war movie I have ever seen was directed by Larisa Shepitko, who is a woman. And some of the great Westerns are made by women, and particularly around film noir, the gangster genre. Many people talk about the film noirs of the great Hollywood directors like Billy Wilder and Orson Welles and Michael Curtiz, etc. But some of the best film noirs were made by women. Ida Lupino, Edith Karlmar, etc., Muriel Box, on and on. So again, the more we inform ourselves about genre, the less we can ascribe characters of sexuality or gender to it. The genre must fly free from any entrapments or boundaries around gender. And when you really separate them, then you start to see what a genre really is. It's a system of signs.
Yeah, it's surprising. I mean, I did my doctoral thesis on Western and melodrama, and a lot of my male colleagues were surprised because they were saying, "Oh, you're interested in Western?" And I think, really, 20th century, we're still talking about this. So it's still quite frustrating.
If you take the Western, for example, as you know, the central human qualities of the Western are solitude, existentialism, and the wide open space. These things, for example, what is male about that? And I think we need to keep challenging people who make those descriptions, because the men and the women on this call and the non-binary people on this call, they choose what human themes are in them and what they respond to. And we cannot allow stereotypes from the past to imprison people.
Do you feel like the classics themselves, I mean, of course, the industry, if you think of Hollywood, was restrictive in the access of women to certain posts. We know that. But do you feel that the classics in themselves, the films in themselves, are more complex than the academia? Oh, that there's a...
Sorry, there's a lot of bad sound, isn't there?
I think it's your...
Right?
Because I don't know what...
It sounds like somebody's saying...
I had mine closed.
Because you...
Mine is closed. I don't know.
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
Now, yes. Now.
Okay. Do you feel that the classics themselves are more complex than some of the readings that were done at a certain time that established certain points of view that have then stayed on? As in, you know, it's important for new generations to revise the classics and somehow maybe skip some of the literature that was written from an academic point of view or critical point of view. I'm thinking of Italo Calvino's description of what a classic is, the one that shakes off the critical discourse around it and always offers something new. Do you feel there's a bit of that to do with genre, for example?
Yes, I personally feel that we should plant a bomb under film history. We should explode it. We should explode the idea of the classics, of the canon, for example, because there are, I mean, I love a lot of the so-called classic films, you know, but so much is left out and so many voices are left out. And so it got the film historians of the past, who are mostly middle-aged white guys like me, got so many things wrong, and they were narcissists. They fell in love with cinema, which was about people like themselves, and undervalued other types of cinema. So yeah, I think explode the whole thing and start again.
Yeah. Is that why, you know, linking to the idea of the personal approach that you call the documentary about film history, the story of film, and also the story of looking, one of your books. It's interesting that they are not called the history of looking.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker, you know, I'm not an academic or even a film historian. I'm a filmmaker. And so story is a bit closer to what I do than history. You know, I do pride myself in trying to find out what I don't know. What I don't know is much more valuable to me than what I do know. Today, I want to end today by having found out something, discovered something that I didn't know this morning. That's a good day. I'm subtly changed as a human being, you know. So yeah, story has a feeling of the kind of fireside or a childhood or the a fable-like quality, which I like. That's why I use the word story in the titles.
Yeah, and the idea of time. I'm thinking, for example, there's a bit in We Make Film where you go from a film by Louis Weber from the early 1920s to a film by Catherine Bigelow in the early 1990s.
Yes.
And the idea that the borders are blurred, the time, even the concept of time is blurred. So maybe you could tell the students the idea of this joy in research and going back to the past, not so much from a film history point of view, but finding out that really exceptional discoveries await if they care to look into the past.
Yeah, that particular connection, I think, is one about chase sequences. You know, if you look at the earliest days in cinema, one of the things they did first was have a good chase. The police were chasing people, or a dog was running away with sausages and the villagers were running after it. And if you cut from that to a chase sequence directed by Catherine Bigelow, you see that they've got the same properties: rhythm, moving from space A to B to C to D, turning corners, cutting back, reaction shots from the person being chased to the person chasing. All these basic elements of the grammar, the language of cinema, were the same back then. And you know, people could say, oh, but you cannot compare something made in 1910 to something made 80 years later. And my answer is you have to. We have to be wild as filmmakers. We have to ignore the categories of history, etc. We cannot be too respectful to the subject. We need to jump. You know, one of the metaphors for creativity is jumping the fence from one field into an adjacent field, a field next door. Always we need to jump the fence and transgress. Like Werner Herzog, one of the things I always carry with me is a pair of wire cutters. So that it's almost to remind me that I have to be wild. And I have to, if I see something over there that would make a great shot, and there's a big wire fence, I won't literally cut the fence, but I'll jump over the fence to get the shot. And we always, as filmmakers, need to be jumping over the fence and making unusual connections between things.
You're great at editing and making those connections. And once you've gone out jumping fences and picking up the elements you need, and you mentioned it's mentioned in the documentary of Women Make Film, the idea that editing is the art of living out. I think it's the quote. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that it's a double question. One has to do with how painful it is to leave stuff out. You feel that sometimes you would need like a second edition to add what you had to leave out. And also, I was fascinated. It's something that I noticed before in your film documentaries, but the idea that you cut scenes in a particular way that what leaves us wanting to go to the film and see what goes on afterwards. So if you could comment on the sort of the wider aspect of editing, and then how you go about the intricate sort of decisions, so when to cut, what frame you cut.
It's always painful to leave stuff out. You know, this film is the Women Make Film was 14 hours long. It could have been much longer. There's no Agnieszka Holland in it from Poland, and dare I say, there's no Isabel Coixet from Catalonia in it either. So I've left lots of things out. That's always painful. When we were making this, someone asked me, a TV station asked me if I could make it in 90 minutes. I said, you know, basically that's what I said. No way. So, but it definitely could be painful. And on your, it is painful. But on your second question about, you know, that sense that I choose a scene that makes you want to see the whole film. Yes, that's right. I see it as a kind of tasting menu. I'm saying, taste this. You might like this. You might not have had anchovies before, but you taste it and you really might like it. So it's a kind of, it's a kind of getting people to fall in love with the thing. Crucially, when you're watching the films, when I'm making a Women Make Film, I'm looking to choose a scene which will stand on its own, that I can take it out of the film and show it in a different context, and it will still make sense. Sometimes there are great scenes, but you need to have seen the whole story to understand the significance of that scene. It has to be something that's visually memorable. I'm lucky enough to have a very, very good visual memory. So I can remember scenes that I saw 20, 30 years ago, and that's useful too.
Yeah. And when it comes to accessing a lot of the films that you mentioned, well, it's difficult to
Yes.
get to them. I mean, I know it's easier in some respects now, but it's still quite a task, particularly because the way films are watched now are mainly through platforms,
Yes.
and they don't care a lot about these kind of films, although there are some exceptions, like here we have Filmin, who cater for that kind, and your documentaries are there, or some of them at least. And then there are other channels like Criterion, which we cannot access from here, for example, or Movie. But it's quite sad to know that a lot of the films you mentioned will be very hard for us to find.
Yeah. Again, to mention Anna Mariscal, her films are not available in good quality, at least to me, so I had to use a clip from YouTube of her film El Camino, because that's all we could get. Yeah. Because of my work, I have contacts with lots of film archives around the world, and they trust me, and so they send me things. So, for example, this Bulgarian filmmaker, Binka Zhelyaskova, I wanted to see more of her work, and I just found the email address of the archivist in Bulgaria, and she sent me this. I'll show you. She sent me this parcel, and in it were discs of Binka Zhelyaskova's films. And she trusted me with these because she knows that I will passionately talk about these films in various contexts around the world. And I think that there are lots of archivists who have great material that they want to make available, and I can help them do that.
Yeah. You have, I wanted to discuss also a film I haven't seen, but also because it puts the focus on other types of women that have to do with the industry, which is Stormy in My Heart, about
yes.
Hayward and Lena Horne.
Yes.
Because I think there's a lot of work at looking at the work of actresses, in this case from the classical period, but because so much of that work has also been overlooked, and if you could tell us a bit of that, because I think it embraces other topics as well.
Yes, I think I think that might be the best film that I've made. It's called Storm in My Heart. I discovered that two famous actresses and singers in American cinema, the two that you mentioned, were born on exactly the same day, in exactly the same year, not far apart from each other in New York. One of them was working class and white, and the other was middle class and African American. And I took their films and intercut them, because the African-American woman, Lena Horne, her scenes were cut out of films when they were shown in the racist parts of America. So the film that I made, it's about the golden age of Hollywood, but it's about feminism and racism and class as well. I'll send you a link to it, and it's the most experimental thing I've done. Basically, we watched two films at the same time, which is quite difficult to do, but really quite exciting. It was a lovely way to look at Hollywood cinema through this unusual lens of race and class.
Mm-hmm. You never stop. You're constantly on the move, even when you cannot move far due to the current circumstances. So how have you handled, for somebody who loves the road so much, how have you handled staying in? I bet you haven't stopped either.
Yeah, well, I film every day. I've got I'll show you the two cameras I use. I use this camera, which is a Sony, many people have it, Sony Alpha 6000. And I use one of these that many of you will have as well. And I film something like 20 shots per day, every single day, just for fun, with no particular purpose. So when lockdown happened, it meant that I've been doing this for many years, I have something like 20,000 shots on my computer here. So it meant that I didn't need to go out and film stuff in the last year. Instead we edited, and I've actually completed 4 feature-length films under lockdown, which will start, 3 of which will premiere this year at, let's say, some of the rather famous film festivals. So that was hugely satisfying to make stuff. Everybody dealt with lockdown and COVID and the crisis in different ways, and most ways were fine. But for me, it was to be creative, to make. And just before we started, Elisabet, I was saying to you that when my grandmother had nothing to do, she made bread and cakes, and I feel as if that's what I've been doing, just making stuff all through.
Could you tell us a bit about the topics you've?
Yes, one of the films, the first film to premiere, will be an adaptation of one of my books. This was my last book.
Yeah.
This one.
You came to Barcelona to present that.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And I adapted it into a film. And because I couldn't go out, I lay in bed and filmed imagining going out into the world. So that was the first one. The second film I've made is about a great British film producer called Jeremy Thomas, who got 9 Oscars in his 30s, like really, for a famous film, The Last Emperor. That's the second one. The third film that I've made is, the story of film that we've talked about. It was 10 years ago. So I've done a update of that, what has happened in cinema in the last decade. And that is 160 minutes long, approximately, and that will premiere somewhere quite prominent this year. And the fourth one I can't tell you about because we've had to keep it secret.
Okay, and I will ask one last question before we ask the students to ask their own. I know the idea of watching film at home is frustrating when you think, we were discussing just before this started, the fact that the Berlinale is going on now online, and it feels so strange because, cinema belongs on the big screen. How do you feel about what kind of landscape will the pandemic leave? What are your thoughts or your hopes when we talk about theatrical exhibition?
I think theatrical exhibition will come back really strong. I know people have been watching Netflix and Amazon Prime and everything, and that's great. The subscriptions to cinephile channels around the world has roughly doubled. So twice as many people are watching art cinema, classic cinema, etc., than were a year ago. That's really good. But, we are all sick of our sofa. The thing about cinema is it's not only about story. I go to the cinema for the sublime, to be in front of something huge and to feel the smallness of that. The luminosity of that. And I cannot wait to get back to that. And I think many of us as human beings, when cinema came along at the end of the 1800s, it provided a need, it touched something really deep in us, ancient in us, to lose yourself in spectacle and in a kind of rapture. And so we all need that. You know, we're all sick of screens this size. I'm sick looking at my face on Zoom, and I'm sure you all are as well. We are longing for something bigger than life. So that's why I'm optimistic. Of course, some of the very famous big films are being held back, like the new James Bond, for example. When it comes, I will be there in the front row. When Christopher Nolan's film Tenet came last year, I was there in the front row. So I think it will return. I think that hopefully, if we've learned anything in lockdown, it's to respect and love community. And therefore, I hope that the community cinemas will be supported by their community.
Yeah, because there's the idea of losing yourself and focusing your full attention on the big screen. And there's also the idea of a collective experience, that's part of the
Yes.
the invention of the cinematographer itself.
Well, can I be honest about that? I usually go to the cinema on like Tuesday afternoon. Well, I go to the cinema every day I can, usually in the afternoon when the cinema is not busy. So yes, people laughing together, crying together. But I personally like the cinema when there are not too many people.
Well, I was thinking more like in film festivals, audiences are more are quieter in general. They are not eating popcorn nonstop.
I know. If I'm sitting in the cinema and somebody eats really, really loud food, I really think I have to stop myself killing that person, which would be not very nice.
Or answering their mobile phones.
Oh no.
Anyway, on this note, maybe it would be good to open up and ask the students to participate. Judy, do you want to handle that?
Yes. Sorry about the mess with the sound, because it seems that some people have the link of panelists, but it's okay. And now it's solved. Well, we have a few questions. One question of Mario Pasamontes, another one from Joel Sierra, another one from Julia Campayo, and another one from Nuria Mora. We will start with these 4 questions, if it's okay for you, and then we can open to other people, because there are people who raise their hands. So we start. Joel, do you want to start? You were the first one to send me a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Joel.
First of all, thank you for being here with us. It's a great honor.
You're welcome.
I had 2 questions, but Elisabet already asked you about them. So I'm kind of thinking about something. So
are you making a film at the moment, Joel?
Yeah. Well, we're working about a series of essays, me and Mario, and we want to talk about cinema.
What particular theme or aspect are you looking at, Joel and Mario?
It's like we're trying to, like you did in your 40 days to learn film, like to express our ideas and our passion about cinema.
Great.
So we want to talk about directors or themes that interest us, and we like to give like a huge vision about what's cinema for us and what it means for us to watch movies.
Fantastic. And of course, the trick always, if possible, is to say something that hasn't quite been said before, or tell us, either to choose filmmakers, a director, or an actor whose work is not talked about enough, or something like that. If you can do that, I think it really helps make your film distinctive, and one of my favorite quotations is from the great French filmmaker Robert Bresson. He said, I quote this a lot, he said, "Try to show that which without you might never have been seen. Show me something that you can see and I can't. And then you're doing something extraordinary and imaginative, So show me a type of cinema, Joel and Mario, that I have not seen, and then you've won.
That's kind of hard.
Well, I don't think it is, because I don't mean choose a filmmaker that I have not heard of or whatever. It's more point of view. Mm-hmm. How do you look at her work or his work, and why does it get under your skin? Why is it, why can you not forget it?
Uh-huh. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Joe. Thank you.
It's always really moving to have someone that talks really passionate about something. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, cinema for me has been, it does relate to questions of mental health. And if cinema has helped me get through this confinement of COVID, it's been there. It's been this window, this handrail on things, it says, come here, let me show you things. And it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you can't move from home, but you have cinema, so you can travel.
Magic carpet.
Well, I'm done.
Mario, do you want to add something? Do you have a question? Because you had another question.
Yes, well, my question was also answered because we had these two questions, Joel and I. But I wanted to say something because you have been, Mark, a big influence to me. I watched your story of film when I was like 14 or 15.
Wow.
And it was very important to me to discover all these interesting films from around the world, from around the decades, that otherwise I might not have come across with. And it was especially important to me, your way of looking at them with so much joy, so much passion, so much imagination. You had a really big part in sparking my curiosity and my love for cinema, which is no little thing. So thank you for showing me that cinema can be much more fun and much more beautiful and much more meaningful than I might have thought. Wow. And thank you so much, Mark.
It's really, really emotional for me to hear people hear you say that, because that is, I sit in this room and make this stuff and send it out into the world. And you don't know, I believe that other human beings will be moved and excited and enriched by the things that I will be, but you don't know. So to hear you say that is great. Thank you so much. And I noticed in your other camera, we've seen, I think, about 3 cameras from you, but I saw a bout de souffle of Jean-Luc Godard in the back of your, voila, there it is. So there you go. Thank you.
Okay, now Julia Campayo have something to ask you. Thanks, Julia.
Hello, do you hear me? Hi. Well, my question is a little bit more technical, but well, I go for it. Do you think that mixing reality and fiction brings veracity to the story told? Like, does found footage add documentary value to the film? And also, do you think there is currently a trend in cinema of using found footage to create new stories?
Yes, I do. So the broad answer to that is that in my everyday life, I feel that reality and fiction combines. Forget about cinema. Just walking down the street, I'm engaging with the real world, crossing a road, but also in my head, in my imagination, I'm thinking of fictional things and dreamlike things. And so the combination of reality and dreams is absolutely the experience of consciousness, of being alive. And both were in the birth of cinema. Lumière and Méliès, both were in the birth of cinema. Found footage, yes. Jean-Luc Godard, who I was just talking about with Mario, he said, that cinema is like food or sunlight or all the other things in life. Cinema, it's not that it comments on life. It is life. It's part of life. And so to use found footage is simply using a bit of the real world, a bit of the exciting reality around us. I love using found footage because it has a kind of unexpected vitality. There's the French writer Roland Barthes. He says that in a photograph, let's take this photograph here by Rakshan Badi Atamid. He says, this is a photograph about a woman, but there are sometimes unexpected things in a photograph which prick you, and he called that the punctum. So it might be her little earring or something. There might be something on the edge of a shot. Like, look at this one, for example. She's a great Korean director, but there's her child. So that idea of the punctum, the thing that moves us or pricks us in an image, is really valuable. And we as filmmakers must always be looking out for that in found footage. And to use found or archive footage in our film can be the equivalent of having the baby partly in shot.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Nuria, you have another question. After this, start thinking questions because we are going to open to the rest of the people.
Hello, me?
Hi, Nuria.
Okay. Hello, Mark. Thank you for being here. My question is that what are your thoughts about Wong Kar-wai? I love this director.
Yes, so I love the films of Wong Kar-wai, and I am lucky enough to have made, his cinematographer was Christopher Doyle, and I've worked with Christopher Doyle twice, so I've worked with a cinematographer. I'm also lucky enough to be friends with Maggie Chung, who was, of course, In the Mood for Love. A key thing about Wong Kar-wai, those rhythms in his films and the colors in his films. A lot of that, the costume design and the rhythm and the color did not come so much from Kar-wai himself. They came from a guy that he worked with called William Chang. Now, if you email about William Chang, you probably already know about William Chang, but I met him, and he was a profound influence on the rhythm of those films. If they've got a musical quality, a lot of that comes from William Chang. I mean, I think that Wong Kar-wai's film, did you see the one that he made in English? It was not so good, in my opinion. But I'm very glad, all his films have been restored and they're coming out, and it's very valuable. I think they're close to the films of David Lynch. I think they're close to the writing of Virginia Woolf as well. You're welcome.
I think there was one hand raised, I've been told here. Nina had the hand raised. I don't know if she had a question.
No, we can move on to other students.
Okay.
Other students, or Judith, I think you also wanted you start smiling.
Yes, I had a question about. Well, I had a question about what do you think about the influence of the using of references from other visual arts like painting or sculpture sometimes, or even architecture? What do you think? Do you think there is a big influence? You made that book about the look of the one that you presented here, and you were talking about this. And I would like to hear something. And another question that I have is that if you have people who send you the films to let you know their films, or.
So, thank you, Judith. I get sent about 20 films per day. So I have thousands of films, people, especially short films, people send me them, and I just cannot, it's very difficult for me because I'm a full-time filmmaker, On the influence of painting and sculpture, etc. I'm lucky enough to know lots of the great filmmakers. All of them are interested in painting. David Lynch is interested in painting. Claire Denis is interested in painting. Martin Scorsese is interested in painting. Tilda Swinton, Pedro Almodovar, it's all interested in painting. It's a central thing for us, isn't it? You know, if you want to shoot a landscape shot, you sort of have to know how Van Gogh did it. You know, it's really crucial, I think. I love painting. I studied art history. That was my university thing, you know. And I paint and draw myself, actually, not brilliantly. And the other art form that most filmmakers are quite interested in is architecture. You know, so, you know, the famous, let's take the famous Mies van der Rohe Pavilion in Barcelona, for example. You know, this, we can learn from that, even though it's reconstructed, as we know, it's not the original, but we can learn. If you go and stand at the Barcelona Pavilion and think of the film that you are making, it will help you structure your film, I think. More so, I would say, than Sagrada Familia, for example, you know. But so architecture, I think, and painting are really, really big influences on filmmakers. Some of the best filmmakers, like Akira Kurosawa, for example, was a very good painter. Sergei Eisenstein, who's on my arm, was a very, very good drawer and painter. So many of them are actually really good as well. Derek Jarman, etc.
Okay, and another more question. Because I'm all the time telling them that they have to try to find a personal style, all my students, and I always give you some clues to try to find. What do you think it defines the style of a director?
Yeah, personal style, personal voice. When I started directing in the late 1980s, unbelievably, and I copied the style of others. I worked in TV in the UK, and there was a style where you did interviews, you did not use a voiceover. There were certain techniques, and I used them, and I was very bad at the start, and I got good at that, but it didn't feel, in a deep sense, I felt I wasn't using cuts and shots the way I wanted to. And I started using voiceover, and I loved the electricity, the spark between a word and an image. So I used that a lot. I started using longer takes, you know, and using less editing, because I actually found that I loved the intensity of a shot when it did not cut. This was me, Judith, finding my voice as a filmmaker. In real life, I'm quite a fast person. I don't sit down very much. But in cinema, my voice is much slower. I try to go for something almost hypnotic, I think. So it took me about 8 years to find my voice, my style, which was poetic, contemplative, and for be hypnotic if possible.
While we wait for other questions,
Yes.
I did have one more. Well, I have a few more, but
Sure.
while we wait for the students to ask theirs, some more, it made me think, recently, thanks to Twitter, I saw the interview you did with Jack Lemmon. And it made me think of, you know, if you could mention how it was to meet, how it has been, or how it enriches you even from a style point of view, the chance to talk in depth with filmmakers.
Yes, that for me has been...
And actors and actresses, of course, yeah.
For me, the most important thing is watching their films. So we need to see the work. In the case of, I was a TV presenter for a while, and I interviewed some of the famous people in Hollywood, Lauren Bacall and Jane Russell and Jack Lemmon and Janet Leigh. You know, I watched the shower scene in Psycho with Janet Leigh, and she's in the shower scene in Psycho. So it was a valuable time. I was very young, and they were all in their 70s. So I have to say the main value for me was as a human being, not as a filmmaker. They had all particularly the women, had been famous for their beauty, their looks, and then Hollywood dumped them for a while because they got old. And so they had to undergo existential crises. And some of them had alcohol problems, and they came out of that. So what I learned was how to come out of bad times in your life. Really valuable, Elisabet. On the filmmaking side, yes, because I'm lucky enough to know a lot of filmmakers, we sit and have pizza and talk about shots and scenes and who's doing what and what we can learn from. But as I say, far more value is to watch their work. And I must say that when I get to know a filmmaker, I try to watch everything that they've done out of respect to them, you know. And I'm so pleased I can see that you have seen a lot of my work. I have to tell you that often people, you know, interview me and they have watched almost nothing. And it's fascinating to see that, you know, because they don't get much out of the conversation as a result, you know. I've seen my work because I made it, you know. So just it's the watching all the films of Claire Denis is really important. Watching all, if you haven't seen any of the films of Kira Muratova, try to see them, you know. We become better filmmakers as a result.
Yeah, yes, as you said, because that's the watching films. I always remind people of the importance of watching, because it's the best way of learning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crucial.
Please, there is any question? Because we cannot see. Yes. Tell us your name, please, because you all have my link. I don't know why.
Everyone's called Judith.
Yes, this was a problem, I think, that I sent the link.
That's why I said Judith earlier, because I could see the noise and it wasn't.
Yeah, it's true. So tell us your name, please.
Okay. Hi, Mark, and everyone. I'm Lorena.
Hi, Lorena.
And I'm a cinema and TV student. And my question is regarding your career and maybe evolution of your career. What big mistakes were necessary for you to be where you are?
You know, that's a great question. By the way, I like the symmetry of your shot. You've got the two things exactly right. It's very good.
Yeah, it's some clothes that I have.
Yeah, I saw something being hung up earlier. So
it was Anderson style.
And the biggest mistake I made was trying to copy other filmmakers. I came from a very working class background. There was no education in my family. There were nobody else interested in cinema. So cinema, I felt that I found cinema for myself. But when I started making films, I tried for a while to copy other people, particularly the Italian filmmaker Pierpaolo Pasolini. I sort of tried to copy him, the brutality of his imagery and style and themes, and I was rubbish at it. It was really bad. So that was a mistake. The best thing I've done is I started filmmaking when it was expensive to make films, when the cameras were really big, when to shoot even a simple scene, you needed like 5 or 4 guys, and it was always guys. You know, so the industry was heavy and slow. But what I did, the best thing I did was get myself really small cameras really fast. So as soon as the technology became available, I jumped forward and I made I'll show you something. I made a whole film with a tiny camera. I made a film in Mexico City, and the entire kit, the camera, the tripod, the script, and everything is in this box. So there is the camera, a little flip camera, and the tripod. This is it. So everything in a box. In other words, I love that word, miniaturized. I miniaturized the process, and therefore I was free. All my friends were trying to get 500,000 euros to make their next film, and I needed no euros to make my next film. And that gave me such creative liberty to do what I wanted. And it was a big understanding for me. So that was the best thing.
Okay, thank you, Lorena. Another question? There is somebody else who wants to ask something? Open your microphone. Yes?
Maybe I'm the same person. Hey. Maybe if we could have some book recommendations, just some books that through life have stood out to you, and maybe you felt something that you want us to feel when we read that book, you know?
Yes.
I mean, I see a ton of them.
Yes.
But
this wall here is that's all film books. Okay. Okay, let me see what. Okay, here's a book I would recommend. One of my favorite filmmakers is the Japanese filmmaker Ozu, and this book is very good, by David Bordwell. And the reason I like it is because it's about it's called the poetics of cinema, and what he means in this book is just that. He's looking at these films not as, social commentary, not as psychology, not as themes in the literary sense. He's looking at them as poetic things. In other words, to do with composition and to do with depth and to do with the structure of the story. It's an academic book, and he's an academic, but for me, it's very valuable as a filmmaker. Also, there are quite a few images in it. I mean, it's a tough book, and only read it if you've seen quite a few of the films. Otherwise, it's too abstract. But I think for me as a filmmaker, I find this very useful.
Thank you.
And also, read Virginia Woolf.
Okay.
If I may, I have another question. This is a practical one, but one that I've always been meaning to ask you. Yes. That has to do with the rights to use images from films. How do you manage that? Because like in Women Make Film, I guess some are easier to get than others, but there I noticed even a clip from Wonder Woman, and we know how the big Hollywood studios are not too keen on sharing some of their stuff unless it's for a vast amount of money. So how does it work? Is there a trick, or how do you manage to use so much footage and make it viable from a production point of view?
Yes. Well, the short answer is we do not clear any copyright. As a filmmaker, you can either go to the studio and say, can we have this clip? Or you can use what's called the fair deal, in English, the fair dealing legal precedent. And that allows any of us here to use an extract of a work of art, an extract, as long as you're going to comment on it in some way or analyze it in some way. So it's legally quite technical, but if you go and Google fair dealing and fair use, I don't know what it would be called in Catalan, but all the information is on the web, online, and it means that we as filmmakers have the right to use an extract of somebody else's work, and similarly my work is extracted by the other people a lot. So it's nothing to do with copyright, nothing to do with clearance at all. It's another track.
And does it have to do with the fact that there's a voiceover on part of the clip, the technicality of it? We don't need to go in depth about.
You need to be analyzing the clip in some way, either with a voiceover or with another shot next to it as comparison. There are many ways you can do it. And there are quite a lot of rules. You're not allowed to speed the clip up, etc. But that's fine. And I think I've been doing this now for about 12 years, and I think I've used fair dealing more than perhaps anybody in the world. And it's perfectly legal, perfectly acceptable. And more than that, I think it's morally right. I think these studios that spend, $50 million marketing their films to us, selling their films to us, trying to get inside our heads, then we have the right to comment about what those films do inside our heads. We don't need to ask their permission.
Yeah. And also because traditionally they didn't have much regard in preserving their own stock, did they?
No. And in lots of places in the world, as you know, still films are not well preserved. India, for example, much of its film history is not properly preserved. So yes, I feel totally, I am legally and morally justified in using fair dealing.
Sorry, I think Alicia Miquel had a question, and I have another question here. First you, Alicia.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for the talk. It's very well, as many of my people from my class said, it's very nice to have you here. I have two questions. The first one is, well, it's not specifically about filmmaking, but as a man who is, like in the patriarchal system, I think it's very nice to hear that you're interested in, that you're doing all this work about the creations of women, and you're talking about Virginia Woolf, and it's very nice to hear that you, as a man, white man, are talking about this. And I would like to know if you have any recommendation on trying to talk about these things to other men who don't have the same open mind as you may have. I find it very difficult, and I'm still trying to find out how to speak about feminism, or just trying to talk about stuff without getting it wrong, because sometimes you try and say something and then people don't understand. Maybe I'm being too generic. I don't know if you know.
No. I mean, it depends what culture, what your country is like. Spain and Catalonia has been traditionally quite macho in some ways, and I come from Ireland, which is very, very traditional about gender, etc. But, when you look at women make film is not really anything to do with women. The only thing it says about women is that they've been very creative. It's about cinema, and yes, I'm a white guy sitting here, but, the best part about me is my creativity and my imagination. And, the world of creativity and imagination is, as I said, sort of borderless, and so these men that you want to talk to, you have to, it's, if they are appeal to their imagination, they are not stuck in the macho culture in which they were brought up, perhaps. We do not need to conform to that. We can fly free of machismo and sexism. Now, the structure of patriarchy is more difficult, because there you're talking about institutions and government and education and employment law, etc. And they take a long time to change. But, when I look at myself on screen, I don't want to think, oh, there's some guy who's stuck in guy thinking. Hopefully I try to unstick myself by being creative. And so if you can talk to your friends who and appeal to their creativity. Give them a Virginia Woolf, ask them to read Orlando, send them a film by Claire Denis, Beau Travail, if they haven't seen Beau Travail, have a look at that. It's once you get out of that rut, then it's fantastic.
That's good. And then the other question is more technical, but I really like the fact that you said that you minimize the process of filming. And I think it's very practical because I film the videos I do with my phone. And sometimes I feel insecure when I have to tell other people, which are like more professional than me or something, that I only use my phone. But at the same time, I can relate to you in the sense that I don't like managing big cameras because I don't feel as free. So I would like to know if you can specify which camera you use. I know you said the Sony Alpha.
Yes, Alpha 6000, yeah. First of all, Alicia, you are 100% right to do it the way you're doing it. You know, using small equipment means we can film in secret almost. And it means that, you know, that you can move faster and you're more free. So I use that one that I mentioned, and then this one, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's an Osmo Pro, you know, and so it used to be for years, I would do tracking shots. I would lay tracks and get a dolly. And now, you know, this does it all. Now this cost me, I can't remember, like 1,000 euros or something, which is a lot of money, obviously, but it has saved me so much money. And I will rent this to my production. I might charge 200 euros per film. And so soon it's paid off. This is very good. But like you, I use my phone. Now, I do not have an iPhone. I've got a Huawei, and it here has got a Leica lens, and the Leica lenses are the best. I think they're better than the iPhone lens. So I shoot 4K on a Leica lens, and I've seen my films in the biggest cinemas in the world. You know, I've had 3 films in the Cannes Film Festival, and so they're really big screens shot with this equipment. So be confident. Do not try to be professional. Professional is quite a male idea in some ways. I think of, you know, I have the right equipment, I dress the right way, I talk the language. I think there's a danger in trying to be professional. It's a trap. You know, it's not certainly trying to be. It's not a very creative thing, I think. You know, so keep doing what you're doing. I think you're doing exactly right.
Thanks. And sorry, the last thing, in terms of sound, do you have any microphone that you attach to the camera or something like that?
I don't. I'll tell you why. I usually shoot silent. Now, I don't always shoot silent, but I usually do. If I'm shooting sound, I'll shoot with a sound recordist. And some of, you know, about a quarter of my films have been shot with sound, and the rest not, because I like post-production sound so much. I like constructing the soundtrack afterwards. I'm very influenced by Federico Fellini, the great Italian director, who said, make a silent film and put a radio play on top of it. So he shot mostly silent, and then he could do whatever he wanted. There's a slight danger. Obviously, this camera shoots sound, but if you've got sync sound, you tend to use it, and it becomes, it's dangerous to have that. You know, if you have no sound, then you have to construct a soundtrack, and I think that's more creative for me.
Okay, I think we're running out of time.
We're running out of time. I have a small question from a professor, Suelan, that she's asking if you have any TV series recommendation.
TV series?
Yes, TV in the platforms, series from the platforms of
okay.
TV to watch.
I like many people, I'm enjoying Call My Agent on Netflix at the moment, the French drama. I think it's good, but I have not been watching a lot of stuff. I watch a lot of documentaries on Netflix, and I think Netflix has been very bad at film history, but pretty good at documentaries. So that would be my only recommendation. But mostly I'm editing. I spend my life editing.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yes, I'm thinking we're running out of time.
I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you again so much, Mark, for being with us. You've given us a lot of food for thought. So I'm very grateful. And personally, I hope to see you in the flesh soon in one of the festivals you mentioned.
Hopefully we will.
See your newest work.
Yes. Thank you all so much for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, a lot. It was very, very inspiring. And thank you again very much.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.